the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, it's Thursday, November 21st. I'm still not that well, so we'll see how this goes. I'm tired. I just want to go to sleep. Yeah, that's what these colds or whatever this is, whatever this bug happens to be, COVID 7.0, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I don't care. I just want it gone, go away. Anyway, slowly maybe getting better. I did go to the doctor today about my shoulder. He was surprised at how well I'm doing. So he said, wow, range of motion is 6 weeks, amazing, strength off the charts. So he wants me to work more on range of motion. It's still painful when I lift my hands in certain ways. So he wants me to work on range of motion, but basically it looks like surgery was success. We won't really know until it's like 4 months in, where supposedly the pain will go away completely, and I'll have full range of motion. Anyway, I thought I'd update you on my shoulder just because I kept you up to date with everything else. My physical therapy, as I told you, I think has been very aggressive. It's pretty amazing. Week 2, they had me start with pulling bands and strengthening, which I like. I would have hated like a passive, slow, physical therapy. Anyway, no more sling. Last night was the last night. I had to sleep with the sling on. So that is worth, I don't know, a glass of wine tonight? Maybe I can drink a glass of wine tonight. Probably not, but that is worth a lot. That is amazing. No more sling on flights. Liberated, free at last. All right, I see some of you already read up on the news, and you're coming here for me to reinforce it for you. Yes, Matt Gaetz is basically pulled out of the running for Attorney General. He will not be the head of the Department of Justice. This is fantastic news. Now, we'll see who Trump nominates in his stead, but it's hard to get anybody lower than Matt Gaetz, and maybe character still matters. Maybe that House ethics report is even worse than we thought, which is probably the case. And even Elon Musk's support didn't help. Maybe there are a few senators with some balls. I don't know. Maybe a few of them have a little bit of balls, and so we will see. But yes, Matt Gaetz is out. Basically, I think his behavior, and the fact is that his behavior, orgies, drugs, prostitutes, was not something he kept secret. It was for years something he boasted about to other members of Congress. So it wasn't like this was a secret. Senators knew this, and I guess they thought maybe character matters at the Justice Department. It would be it's quite a revolution, but maybe. Anyway, we'll see now who Trump nominates. I'm sure Trump is not happy. He did his nominations very quickly. He had his people lined up, and he's not happy about this. Others who are still struggling, the guy who's up for defense, detailed accounts of the sexual assault charge against him have leaked or been revealed, or whatever you want to say. So I don't know if that'll matter one way or the other. Tulsi, there's real opposition, I think, to Tulsi. And of course, RFK. So let's just do RFK quickly, and then we'll go on to other things. RFK, Trump's nominee for Health and Human Services. It turns out that in 2017, on a news show or something, RFK called Trump, I mean, this is unthinkable, called Trump and his supporters Nazis and railed against him. He said Trump's base was belligerent idiots. Some were outright Nazis, and others were spineless fellow travelers. He likened Trump to historical demagogues like Hitler and Mussolini and accused Trump of exploiting insecurities and xenophobia in order to amass power. I mean, I like this other RFK. And then he said that at least one way Trump was not like Hitler. Hitler actually cared about policy. Yeah, I mean, he had detailed policy like how to exterminate the Jews versus Trump that didn't care about policy. Anyway, all this is leaked, and other comments he made later on in 2019, where he said that Trump had basically turned his administration over to corporate lobbyists. Anyway, RFK has apologized. He has apologized, and he blames what everybody blames. I mean, when you do something wrong and you say something stupid, then who do you blame? Who do you blame? Who do you blame? You blame the mainstream media. I mean, that's obvious, right? That everybody loves to hate the mainstream media, so let's blame the mainstream media. So he basically says, like many Americans, I allowed myself, this is RFK, not me, I allowed myself to believe the mainstream media's distorted, dystopian portrait of President Trump. I no longer hold this belief and now regret having made those statements. So, yeah, all right. I mean, will that hurt him? I don't know. I don't know. By the way, in August this year, not in 2019, this year, 2024, in August, he was asked whether he would join Trump's cabinet, and Kennedy said, absolutely. Well, he didn't say absolutely. He said no. Anyway, now he's going to be in the cabinet. Cool for RFK. So we got RFK, Gaetz. I mean, the great thing about the Gaetz thing is that not only did he resign from Congress, he's no longer a congressman in the 118th Congress. He did get reelected for the 119th Congress. Theoretically, he could still serve when the 119th Congress comes together. He has said he will not. We'll see if he lives up to that. But that would be great, because if he quit the Justice Department and is not in Congress, that's a win-win-win-win. And maybe, this was Donald Trump playing 5D chess all along. Ultimately, this was his way of getting rid of Gaetz in the House. Maybe he just didn't want him. Maybe he didn't like him. He got rid of McCarthy. Maybe this is the way for him to pay back McCarthy. Maybe this is the 5D chess playing into here. I don't know. Could be. But yes, Gaetz is out. Maybe he'll come back to the House next year. I don't know. We will see. But he will not be. He will not be Attorney General. That is, I have to say, a relief. A relief. Somebody says he's going to run for Senate in Florida. Oh, I guess he's going to run for Marco Rubio's seat. Interesting. Okay, there you go. Maybe DeSantis will appoint him because Rubio will vacate the seat to take on his new job as Secretary of State. He will vacate it in January, and maybe Gaetz will be appointed senator by DeSantis. I mean, that's possible. I don't know. There's something in me that still has a little bit of respect for DeSantis and thinks that he won't go for that. That he'll appoint somebody else, and then what's his name? Gaetz can run in a primary against whoever he picks in 2026. Anyway, that's the latest news from. Oh, No, it's not the latest. There's one other thing about appointments. Yeah, I mean, which is worth mentioning. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. And that is that, what's his name? Lutnick, who is appointed to be Secretary of Commerce in charge of trade and all things related to trade. It turns out Lutnick has a lot of China ties. He has a lot of financial interest in China. He has a partner in a couple of businesses at least that have businesses in China. And I don't know, people are starting to ask questions about his relation with China and his now job in terms of his now job regarding trade and commerce and all of that. And there are questions, starting to ask questions. I don't think that'll. I think he can probably free himself of those commitments. He can probably divest himself from those partnerships and do stuff to mitigate some of that. But here's the reality. The reality is that there's always something. Particularly if you're a Trump candidate. Now, I expect that within hours, maybe it's already happened, on Twitter and elsewhere, this will all be blamed on the left-wing conspiracy, mainstream media, and Democrat elites' viciousness and trying to undermine Trump even before he gets going. I'm sure it was not the case. It is not the case that they will say, oh, yeah, it was just a bad choice by Trump. Bad choice by Trump. All right. So let's talk about DOGES. DOGES? DOGES? How do you pronounce this? I don't know how you pronounce it. Now, this is an interesting name. Department of Government Efficiencies. I don't know what the S stands for. But really, this acronym was chosen as a kind of nod to Elon Musk's favorite cryptocurrency. It's even weird to call it a cryptocurrency. It kind of almost is an insult to all other cryptocurrencies. But the idea here is that Elon Musk at one point endorsed DOGES. It was a nothing currency. It was kind of launched as a joke. It's a very dodgy coin, very good haul, very dodgy coin. And but Elon Musk endorsed it. It went up through the roof. It then collapsed. It's been up and down depending on Musk's mood since then. And I guess he gave it another nod by calling this his new role in a new department in government after this coin. So this is quite, I guess, quite exciting. God, what is all this? No, I don't want that. I don't know what that is. Sorry, I'm trying to find the article that I actually want versus the articles that are being. Yeah, why are these not loading? Yeah, we got that. And where's the one I actually want? All right, so today in the Wall Street Journal, you guys can go to the Wall Street Journal and you can find an editorial by, you can find it, but I obviously can't because for some reason it did not load. Yeah, I mean, I've got the new Mac Mini. Here it is. Isn't this cool? I mean, it is tiny. It's so small. It's so small. It's amazing, and I'm really excited about it, but I just haven't had time to, hook it up and then transfer everything over and get it all rolling. I mean, it's not easy to do that. Maybe tonight I'll try to do it when I get home after dinner and get it running. I need to do it before I leave for Europe. I need to send this one in for the exchange. So I need to get it out there. So I will try to do it. Anyway, let's see. Let's see if I can find this article. Anyway, Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have an op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal, basically outlining their plan for how to cut government spending in dramatic fashion, and how to cut the government bureaucracy, and what they're going to do. So I thought we'd go over that because it is interesting. It is interesting, kind of the strategy. I now kind of get the strategy. And look, all ill views of the Trump administration aside, I mean, I really, really hope Musk and Ramaswamy are successful. I would love to see the government shrink, however much it can shrink. And if the shrinkage is by eliminating regulators and eliminating regulations, then it's a win-win-win-win-win. I mean, there's no downside to that. There's no losers to that. That is just all good. And it really does seem like that is what they are proposing. Musk and Ramaswamy are really proposing to do this. Now, this could be, maybe with the exception of the Energy Department, but maybe even more so because it could have more far-reaching effects. This could be the best cabinet, the best idea, governmental idea that Trump has had. But let's start with being real, right? We have to be real. And I think this op-ed by Elon Musk and Ramaswamy is the beginning of them being real. They're not going to cut $2 billion of government expenses. That's just not. It's just not there. It's nowhere near. It's nowhere near that. You can't do that without really digging into entitlements. They really have no intention of digging into entitlements. Maybe with the exception of fraud, but fraud is not. There's no $2 trillion in fraud. So I don't know. Did I say 2 billion or 2 trillion? I meant 2 trillion. So there's no. They're not going to do. They're not going to cut 2 trillion, which is what Elon Musk promised. That just is not happening. All right. An encoder error occurred while recording. That's fine. I don't. If you don't want to record, you don't have to record as long as you stream. We're streaming. All right, we're streaming. Yeah, I need the new computer. Today's show, without any doubt, is proving the necessity of the new computer. Anyway, so what Elon Musk and Vivek really are trying to do is, I said billions, I meant trillions. So 2 trillion. They're not going to cut 2 trillion. There's just no way to do that, given defense, interest payment on the debt, and Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which Trump has said he won't touch. You can't cut 2 trillion without those. But what they're going to do is they're going to make, again, if they follow through and they're allowed to follow through and they can do it and they can execute and they can pull it off and the Supreme Court backs them up and this doesn't implode in their face and it could take a decade. What they could be doing is putting in place, real radical change in the way government runs. So let me lay it out for you in terms of what I think they are thinking right now, and based on their op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and then I'll tell. We'll see how it plays out. But I've talked about this before. In this sense, Justice Gorsuch in the Supreme Court is a real opponent of the administrative state. And has made it kind of his goal, I think, his life goal as a justice of the Supreme Court to do what he can to dismantle the administrative state. Now, what is the administrative state? The administrative state is all those regulatory agencies, all the alphabet soup agencies that are out there that regulate and control our lives, anywhere from the EPA, established under Nixon, to the SEC, established under FDR, to all the others. I mean, the FCC and all these things. And one of the great challenges, one of the things that's happened over the last few years, we talked about this when we talked about the Supreme Court decisions at the end of this last court's term, is that the courts have had this position called Chevron, which was a decision made in the 1980s, that if an agency, in deciding a dispute, err on the side of the agency. And generally, there's been this doctrine that it's okay for Congress to delegate to the agency the rules that it makes. And what we've seen as a consequence is an ever-expanding mandate for these agencies. They're created to do one thing, and then suddenly they're doing 75. And they argue all the 75 are related to the one thing, but Congress didn't explicitly tell them they could do the 75. I mean, probably the most egregious of these, but one nobody talks about, but probably the most egregious of these is Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank is an incredibly complicated, massive piece of legislation regulating banks. And what has happened with Dodd-Frank is the Congress basically said, we're going to create a shell. And they explicitly said this, we're going to create a shell. And we're going to let regulators fill the shell in. We're going to let the regulators fill out the details. We're not going to legislate the details. The details will be filled out by the Fed and the FDIC and the 5 different major regulatory agencies that regulate banks. So we're going to let all those figure this out, right? Figure this out. So that is, so the court has had 2 rulings, one an EPA ruling and one a Chevron ruling, to basically overturn this, to basically say, no. From now on, we are not going to accept an expanded mandate for these regulatory agencies. It's what Congress intended. Congress is the legislature. There's a separation of powers in the United States. And if Congress did not tell you you could do X, you cannot do X. And in deciding how to interpret the law and how to interpret what the regulatory agency is doing, we're not going to rely on experts. Courts are going to have make those decisions. Courts, it's their job to interpret legislation and to figure out what legislation is meant and to figure out whether the agency is violating the legislation or not. So what you have here is the Supreme Court basically saying, we're going to hold regulatory agencies to a new standard. Basically, the standard is going to be what the legislators intended. Now, this is the first time since at least the 1980s that this has been done. And Congress is quite happy letting the regulators legislate because Congress is lazy or, afraid or troubled by different pressure groups, and they would rather not bother. Let the regulators do the hard work. Now comes Elon and Vivek and say, what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the regulatory agencies and we're going to identify all the things that they do that is not in legislation. that's not in legislation. And then we are going to ask Trump to write an executive order stopping them from doing it. And then if we're sued, which they will be on every one of these, we are going to count on the Supreme Court ruling for us, for the government, because, for the legislative branch, because Gorsuch and the courts have already ruled generally in this direction. Now, this is unprecedented because one of the things I think the Supreme Court said in its decisions is that its decision would apply for all new things, that it wouldn't be backward looking because the justices recognized, and I know this is complicated, but life is complicated, guys. The justices recognized that if they went backwards to relitigate everything regulatory agencies are doing, that would upend the whole regulatory regime, which I would celebrate, but the justices will worry about because it was too revolutionary. Now Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are basically going to force them to do exactly that. At least to make a decision and to rule on whether the executive, whether the president can wipe out certain regulations. So that is, if that's what they do, which the op-ed suggests that they're going to do, as I understand from reading it. I mean, and if they take it seriously, and if they don't play politics with it, and if they go all out and really do it, wow, it's a revolution. It really will revolutionize government. It will shrink the regulatory agencies dramatically. It will take these regulations off the book. They will have a court ruling that legitimizes it. Congress would have to literally write new laws in order to get this stuff back. So it couldn't be the case. See, first time around, what Trump did was, it's just that the heads of the departments they in a sense deregulated by fiat. But then the heads of departments could come back, as they did under Biden, and redo all those stuff. But if the courts rules that it's unconstitutional, that is, the very fact that the regulatory agency did this to begin with is unconstitutional, then the new administration that comes after Trump can't put them back in. I mean, if it works, and I'm not sure it will, but if it works, it's really brilliant. I mean, it's not as deep a revolution as I would want. And it's not a thought-out revolution because it won't go through what are the regulations that it makes sense to most get rid of, not from the perspective of cost, but from the perspective of functioning economy. But man, will it shrink the power of the regulatory agencies, the most evil agencies out there, and could be a huge, huge boon for the American economy. So that, I think, is the primary focus of Musk and Ramaswamy. And it's going to depend on the Supreme Court backing them up. But remember that a lot of this is going to take time, because once they start doing it, this will go to the courts. And the courts take their time. And ultimately, this will be appealed. And it'll be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. And, you know, then they'll have to make a decision, and all of that could take years. So we're not going to see anything imminent. But if it goes, if it works, then this could have huge long-term consequences. And I said this when the Supreme Court reversed Chevron and reversed and did what it did with the EPA. This will hopefully put the Congress back in its role as legislature, regulatory agency back in their role as, branches of the executive, and with limited powers, very limited powers, limited by legislation. And this will kind of complete that revolution that I think Gorsuch is eager to do. The one, and so we'll see. Now, it's also going to be interesting to see which regulations they choose, how much politics they play with these regulations. That is, it could be, like if this was the vice president, right, then he's going to want to keep the regulations that he likes and just take out the regulations he doesn't like. Now, how much influence he has, whether Trump even cares, I don't think Trump cares much. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing if they can pull it off. And I think would be really good. Would be really, really good. Trump said DOGES has a year and a half. They have a year and a half to make proposals. They can't do anything, right? So they can't implement anything. They can't put anything into actual operations. All they can do is make proposals. Trump's people are then going to have to write up a bunch of executive orders. And then they're going to have to write up executive orders saying, this agency can no longer pursue this regulation. And then the agencies will sue. And then the whole thing starts. So this is, as I said, a multi-year process where all you're going to get from DOGES is a list of recommendations, nothing more than that. They have no actual power. And it's not about transparency. If it's just about transparency, then it's a massive waste of time. Now, let's be clear. This will not do much, even if fully executed, to cut government spending. This will not do much to reduce the deficit or to shrink our debt. But this will do a huge amount, if it's done right, to liberate American business and to free them from the crazy regulatory regime that they function under right now. So there is real potential here. So I like the strategy. As I don't like it philosophically, right? It's the wrong strategy philosophically, because the right strategy is, to move to get rid of all these agencies. But you have to realize that these agencies, Congress is not going to eliminate them. Republicans don't have 60 votes in the Senate, but even if they did, Republicans don't want to eliminate them. And the advantage here is that, in the past, the burden was on the legislature to write deregulation bills. Now, and this is what the Supreme Court has done, the burden will shift to the legislature to write back in the regulations. And that's hard. And that's where they'll need 60 votes. That's where they need 60 votes. All right. So, no, he's not going to eliminate $2 trillion. That was fantasy from the beginning, from the first time he said it. But yes, they could do big things. Now, will they? Will Trump want it? Will Trump pass it? Will Trump and Musk fight next month and this whole thing will fall apart? That I do not know. But, Vivek and Elon are not idiots. And there is actually a strategy here. And it's a thought-out strategy. I think they're overly optimistic. I think they're overly optimistic. But it's not a bad strategy in terms of dealing with the world in which we live and figuring out how to get around the barriers and how to make a dent in these regulations. Now, add to this some other things that they want to do, which I think are probably less effective. They're going to try to do things like force all government employees to come into work 5 days a week, like Amazon is doing with its employees. And so they are going to force them with the assumption that a big chunk of the employees will just quit rather than coming into the office. If they do that, they're going to have to face the unions, the government unions. Is Trump going to be willing to fire, government unions if they go on strike, like Ronald Reagan did with the controllers, air traffic controllers? I doubt. I don't know. Right? He ran as a pro-union guy. I think Musk and Ramaswamy are probably naive in terms of the other stuff that they think. In terms of cutting government spending, I think in every other respect, they're naive. And again, the numbers are not going to be big. They're not going to cut a lot of dollars. They also are going to fraud and they're going to go into the Defense Department and all these other departments, and they're going to fix the fraud and fix this and fix that. That is all hot air. That is all nonsense. I don't think that can be done. I do think this teaming up with the Supreme Court thing, which they don't really fully spell out in the op-ed because maybe they don't want to completely reveal their strategy, but I think I figured it out. That I find really interesting, and am mildly excited about it if they can pull it off, and if Trump will support it, which is probably won't happen. By the way, one of the things they want to do with each of these agencies is they want to use AI. We'll see how that works to figure out which of the thousands of regulations that each one of these agencies has actually fits their mandate or doesn't. So that's interesting, right? Because if you actually had to go through all these, it'd take forever. You couldn't get it done. So they want to go through, they want to use AI to do it, right? And then give Trump thousands of regulations to cut across the government and have him approve their elimination by executive order, and then take it to courts. And so that'll be interesting. And then once these regulations are eliminated, then the next step could be, for example, to say, okay, well, now you have less to do, agency. Here's the number of people we want you to cut in order to do it. Musk thinks he can cut 80% or something like that. Probably not. But, start cutting employees. Again, you've got unions, you've got challenges, but that's what they want to do. They want to also create 7 packages, incentives for early retirement for employees. They want to force them into, again, coming into work all the time. They want to cut programs where Congress, basically, where the spending authorization is lapsed. Now, this is problematic because it includes, for example, the VA spending authority is lapsed. NASA spending authority is lapsed, and certainly anti-poverty programs. I don't think these are programs Trump wants to cut. Anyway, they're gonna. Do you know that the Defense Department? It would be funny if it wasn't so unbelievably sad and pathetic. The Defense Department has failed its audit. In other words, the $800 billion that the Defense Department spends, they can't figure out where it went. Can't figure out where it went for the 7th year in a row. So, there's something like $6 trillion, I don't know, that they don't know what it is. They don't know how it was allocated exactly and who has it and what's going on. They failed the audit for 7 years in a row. You know the last organization that failed the audit over and over and over again? Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. In the early 2000s, we got a great financial crisis not long after that. Pretty amazing that, it's not secret programs. All you need is a line item saying secret programs, $5 billion. I mean, that's not hard. When you fail an audit, you literally don't know where the money is. And that's corruption, mismanagement, corruption and mismanagement, and just awful systems, awful systems. But don't worry, this is what the Fox host of Fox and Friends has trained his entire career to fix. He knows how to fix this. 3 million employees and how to fix a budget that cannot be audited and hasn't been audited properly for 7 years. You know, the other thing we're going to see is, here's a question for you, right? If Congress approves certain budget items to spend, can the president unilaterally not spend the money? Just stop spending it. Now, I would think he can't, because that's Congress's job. His job is to spend it once Congress allocates it. But it looks like one of the things that Musk and Ramaswamy want is to challenge that in the Supreme Court and get a ruling over it. In 1974, the Supreme Court ruled that no, the president cannot stop funding things that Congress has approved. Ukraine aid, for example. And they want to challenge it. They want the Supreme Court to re-examine it. One wonders how much input they're getting from people like Gorsuch with their plan. Anyway, more serious than maybe what one would have expected. All right. Yeah, all right. Let's go to ICC. ICC, God. So, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has basically issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu, the former Minister of Defense of Israel, and the dead military commander of Hamas. Now, they issued it for the dead military commander of Hamas because his death is not being confirmed by Hamas. He could be alive, so they've issued a arrest warrant for them. If Netanyahu travels, even in his capacity as prime minister, to any country that has signed basically the ICC, up to the ICC, he could be arrested. Now, this includes the entire European Union. And indeed, the European Union High Representative for Foreign Affairs has stated that all members of the European Union are obliged to enforce the arrest warrants issued by the ICC. Now, the ICC is an illegitimate, immoral institution to begin with. Even when they prosecute people I think they should prosecute, that should be prosecuted, like Putin. You can't prosecute political leaders of other countries. Not until you defeat them. So, like the Nuremberg trials. But there is no world government, thank God, or thank whatever. There is no world government. There is no world court, or there shouldn't be a world court. There is no world police, military. There is no enforcement mechanism. There is no world legal system. And indeed, I think illegitimate. I think international law, per se, is illegitimate. Treaties are legitimate, but international law is illegitimate. So, here is a court of basically a bunch of European leftists who are bought into the far left agenda, who basically have embraced the idea of Israel committing genocide in Gaza, who are playing high politics in the most complicated, complex regional conflict in the world right now, and basically, you know, making decisions, bringing it to court. You can't bring people to court over a war. Courts are within the state. They're not extra state. They're not above the state. Not above the state. right? So it's completely legitimate. It's an example of the attempt of the Europeans to put themselves somehow, above the nation state. And look, there are horrible things that leaders of states do, horrible. And if somebody wants to go in there and, like Saddam Hussein, and kill them or put them to trial and kill them, then go for it. Again, like the Nuremberg trials. But you cannot do this from the outside. Now, if people sign on to this treaty that is part of the ICC, if countries say, yep, okay, we recognize this court, then fine. But on what basis does it rule? Where is the Constitution? What is the system of law that guides it? And don't tell me the Constitution is the European Constitution, which is a joke. But what Constitution is guiding the laws? And where is the legal system? Where are the laws guiding this court? What are the appeal mechanisms? What is the system? So this is evil through and through. Again, it's an attempt by European leftists to impose their views on everybody else. Everybody else, not through any kind of process of persuasion, not through defense of individual rights, but no, imposing authoritarian ideas on all of us through the courts. And of course, they did this with Putin. Now, Putin's a bad guy, so I'm not going to get too upset. But now they're doing it with the good guys. And there's no limit to this. They could prosecute George W. Bush for going to Iraq. They could prosecute every American general. They could make it impossible for Americans to travel to Europe, or many Americans to travel to Europe, because they could be arrested in Europe. Anyway, they need to be called out on this. Now, I will give, again, we'll see what Trump does about this. But it does look like the Trump administration might, Republicans in Congress might, actually sanction the members of the International Criminal Court. They might force a crisis at the court. And maybe, wouldn't this be amazing if it happened, see if we could see the entire collapse of the International Criminal Court. It would be good to eliminate this completely. In the meantime, Netanyahu and Gallant and cannot travel overseas to many countries. They can come to the United States because the United States is not a signator to the International Criminal Court. But if they travel to a signator country, then they're in trouble. And, Congress can say this is unacceptable because, and Congress should, and Trump should, because this has real consequences for the U.S. If they can get away with this for Israel, they can get away with it with American presidents, defense secretaries, generals, colonels, whatever. They, above the law, above the state, some kind of judiciary, get to dictate all these things. So, yeah. Big step backwards for them. Okay, Walmart. So, Trump is, making a lot of noise about tariffs. Walmart CEO basically said that if tariffs are raised significantly, Walmart will raise their prices. And all hell is broken loose on the internet. People are accusing Walmart of whatever, and they can't raise their prices. They won't raise their prices. They'll have to source products outside of China. China's still the largest producer of many of these products. And when they source products out of China, they're probably Chinese goods that are just being shifted through Vietnam, so it's all a scam. And Trump has said that he will raise tariffs on all goods coming to the United States, not just from China. And then there's the idea that if Walmart raises prices, that has, that'll piss off Trump voters, and then they won't shop at Walmart anymore, which is just ridiculous, right? Now, remember, let's just think this through. Walmart has a net profit margin of about 2%. 2% is what Walmart makes. So when you buy something for $20, then Walmart is making a 20-cent profit off of it. Is that right? $20, 20 cents. Oh, sorry, not 20 cents, 40 cents. They're making 40 cents on a $20 purchase. So if you buy something for $10, they're making 20 cents on it. That's it. If you raise tariffs by 20%, you've just eliminated all of the margin, all of the profit. There's just no way Walmart does not pass that cost on. And Walmart couldn't do it unless it was a tax imposed on everybody. Everybody's going to do it because everybody has to make a profit. If the tariff is 60%, then the cost is going to have to be passed on. Now, not all 60%, but a big chunk of it, most of it, if not all of it, in some cases, depending on whether there are alternatives. There is just no way prices don't go up. And of course, that's the point of tariffs. Isn't the whole point of tariffs is bring jobs back to America, which means prices go up for Chinese goods. So you buy American goods that were more expensive than the old Chinese goods, but less expensive than the new Chinese goods because of the tariffs. So all these people claiming that Walmart won't do it, can't do it, should be illegal for Walmart to do it, greedflation, stop this now, they're just playing pretend. They're in a different universe. They're not connected to reality. And anyway, the reality is that Walmart will have to raise prices, as will every other retailer in the country. So it won't be just Walmart. All of them will. And prices go up. Now, that's not inflationary because all that means that you'll spend more money on the things you have to buy and you'll have less money left over to spend on other things. It won't be inflationary because not all prices in the economy will actually go up. All right. Whoops, what happened here? See if this will load. All right. I like to follow up on some of the crazy stuff that happens that I call on and then kind of disappears. So just to make sure that I'm legit, so that I'm right. So remember, right after the election, there was this big conspiracy theory. All the Trump voters on the right said, "Oh God, 20 million votes are missing. What happened?" And basically suggesting that the 2020 election was a fraud because there are 20 fewer votes this election than last election and all of that. So they suggested that Biden and Trump received a combined 155,500,000 votes in 2020 and 2024. At that point, when they were making these arguments, they'd only received 135 million votes. So where's the 20 million votes? They've gone missing. And I said, oh, no, they're not missing. It's just you have to wait until they get counted. California and a lot of the western states. Oh, Siri, nobody asked you anything. A lot of the western states take their time counting. Well, we now have about 99% of the count in. Not all of it. It's still about 1% out. But about 99% of the count in. And guess what? There are 154 million votes. So we're still missing about 1 million. But that's why I said there's still a 1% to be counted. And 1 million, okay, so 1 million people decided not to vote this election that voted last time. That is very reasonable. Very reasonable. So, yeah, another conspiracy theory into the dumpster of history. If only. I bet you'll hear this one months into the future, if not years. And we'll have forgotten the explanation by then. But this is how it gets going, right? They make this stuff up and they say this stuff and it's just God. All right. Let's see. Yeah, Trump really looks serious about deporting the illegal immigrants. He's appointed people that are really committed to it. And he said he would sign an executive order day one declaring a state of emergency and bringing in the troops, bringing in the military to do it. I think there'll be lawsuits immediately and it'll go to the courts and it's going to be delayed and all of that. But then there's going to be some interesting things happening around the country. I mean, a number of mayors have already said they won't allow it. That is that their police forces will block the entry of the military into their cities. Now, I don't know how that'll work. And is anybody going to authorize opening fire? Is this the beginning of a civil war, I guess, between the cities and the rural areas? Because that's how America is divided. Not red and blue states, but red and blue areas, red and blue neighborhoods. But for example, Democratic Mayor of Denver, Colorado, Mike Johnson, has said that he will deploy the Denver City Police and volunteers from the local community to use force against federal forces trying to deport illegals. He said that he will also ask the community to come out. So he expects 50,000 Denverite civilians to be out in the streets trying to stop the federal government from the act of deportation. Interesting. What happened here? Something weird happened on the super chat. Clark, for some reason, your super chat disappeared. I wonder if others disappeared as well now. Yeah, Michael. Yeah, I have a feeling a bunch of super chats have disappeared. Let me try to redo this. I'm saying. Very strange. Wow. All right. Give me a second here while I try to figure out how to at least get these super chats so I don't lose them, so I can answer them all. But I don't know what happened to the software here that made this happen. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be capturing these ones. All right. Give me 2 minutes and to do some copy pasting. Did you get a chance? All right. See if there are any others quickly. This piece of software that usually works perfectly is for some reason not working. Oh, I see. That works. Okay. Almost done. All right, let's see. So it's going to be interesting to see, does this deteriorate into some kind of civil war? Is anybody willing to actually pull a trigger? What does that look like exactly? How does this all evolve? And you know, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. 60, 75. So let's do, I'm just going to adjust this. All right. We're very close to the first hour's goals. I think we're like $10 short of the first 250. If somebody wants to do that, $10 just to get us to the first 250, that would be great. All right, what else do we have? Final story. The city of Chicago. God. I don't know how much you know about the city of Chicago, but the city of Chicago is just a real marvel. It's one of the greatest cities in the world. At the end of the 19th century, Chicago was the fastest growing city, not just in the United States, but Chicago was the fastest growing city in the world. It just exploded in growth. It went from 300,000 people in 1870 to 1.7 million by 1900. That's 30 years. It grew by 1.4 million people. It was one of the real marvels with some of the most exciting and most interesting architecture in the United States. Sullivan, the great architect of skyscrapers, came to Chicago and became a significant builder of, I know it says 167, but it's missing $75 of super chats for some reason. For some reason it didn't capture $75 of super chats. No idea why, no idea how it happened. There's there was a gap where it was not capturing them, and it didn't go backwards and capture them, which I don't know. Usually it does that. So it's more than 167. So we're just $10 short of the 250. I mean, this is the most exciting city in the world. Skyscrapers, Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, built homes there in the early part of the 20th century. But Louis Sullivan, who was really the father of American architecture, and he arrived right after the Great Chicago Fire in 1871 and helped rebuild the city and build it as a great American city with great skyscrapers, with ingenious designs. And, you know, Sullivan, if you think about the fountainhead, Sullivan, if you think Howard Rourke is somewhat like, what's his name? Frank Lloyd Wright, then Sullivan is like Cameron, right? In 1883, Mark Twain wrote, "It is hopeless for the occasional visitor to try to keep up with Chicago. She outgrows his prophecies faster than he can make them." Chicago is a hub, a railroad hub, a trading hub. It was at the center of the whole agricultural Midwest, and a connector between the agricultural Midwest and, of course, the industrial Midwest, the industries in Michigan and in Wisconsin and in Illinois and in Indiana, and connected to the East Coast. It was this massive railroad hub with everything. It is the place in which the futures market was based and the place in which the futures market was invented. It was a place of invention. It was a place of growth. It was a place that defined kind of the American dream and American expectations. And a lot of wealth was created in Chicago, and a lot of businessmen and a lot of families were built around business and about the business of business in Chicago. And yet, Chicago now is a dying city. It's still the third largest city today, but it's the slowest growing major city in the United States. Indeed, Chicago has lost 1 million residents since it peaked to 3.6 million in the 1950s. Its population today, 2.6 or so million, is about where it was in the 1920s. 1920s. So we're talking about a fading city, a city that is being famously corrupt, mismanaged, famously part of the Democratic machine, going back to Mayor Daley and his son and the Democratic machine in Chicago that probably actually stole the election for Kennedy over Nixon in 1960. In every respect, this city is in crisis, best illustrated by its unbelievably crumbling and ineffective, disastrous educational system, that is, its schools. Just give you an example. This is an article on Pirate Wires today, which is about Chicago. There is a school in Chicago called the Frederick Douglass Academy High School. That's a great name for a high school. The Frederick Douglass Academy High School. It's in Chicago's West Side, which is a poorer neighborhood. When it was built to hold 900 students. Today it has 35. Most of whom don't even show up to class. Despite this, the school still employs 23 full-time staff members and spends about $68,000 per student annually. I mean, they could send these kids to the best boarding schools. Well, maybe not, but the best high schools in America don't charge $68,000. Maybe the boarding schools do. But that's just an exaggerated illustration of how bad things are. Teachers constantly get raises. Education constantly gets worse. Now, in addition, Chicago today basically is bankrupt. It has massive pension liabilities. It has promised government employees, particularly teachers' unions, higher and higher and higher and higher pensions. And yet, the money that goes into the pension fund has been used repeatedly by the city on regular spending stuff. Chicago holds more pension debt today than all but 7 American states. So the one city, more debt than 43 states in America. 80% of Chicago's property tax levy goes to pensions. And debt service for these pensions is 40% of every dollar spent by the city. Its total budget only grows. So what happened was in COVID kind of bailed out Chicago. They got this massive influx of money as part of their government bailing out everybody, right? They got this huge amount of money. And they spent it. But they didn't cut their spending after they stopped getting money from the federal government. So if in 2019 the federal budget, the city budget was $10.7 billion, in 2024 it's $16.6 billion. And even though, federal aid is gone, they still spend. Of course, Chicago crime is particularly bad. Among major cities, it's one of the worst. And nobody really cares. Reform of the police force has been attempted, but the police force is corrupt. It's corrupt in both sides. They don't enforce the law, but also when they do enforce it, they tend to shoot people up, like the murder of Laquan McDonald's, where black teenagers were shot by 16 times by a police officer. And then the police officer tried to lie about it and cover it up and so on. And now we have multiple agencies, oversight bodies trying to supervise the police that have basically handcuffed the police and made it impossible for the police to do anything and not improved anything about the police's performance. The number of crimes actually solved in Chicago is minuscule, something like 10%, half of what it was 20 years ago. And of course, the city's corrupt. It's always been corrupt. It's just maybe more overtly so, or maybe it was more overtly in the past, but it's just always been corrupt. And it is run today by a mayor who is from the far left, not kind of the moderate, but the far left, the kind of far left that now San Francisco's kicked out, and you know. So if you think about the far left has completely gone bankrupt in San Francisco. San Francisco has replaced the city council, the mayor, the school board, everybody, and is moving, maybe, one could hope, in a better, more healthy direction. Chicago is stuck with a mayor that is way out there in the left. While not having any money, the mayor, this administration in Chicago has tried to build a migrant camp, but it landed up building it on toxic land. It's hired 4 top staffers who support defund the police or abolish the police. It ousted all 7 members of the Chicago School Board after they refused to issue a $300 million high-interest loan, which is probably the right thing, although I'm sure the school board is pretty corrupt as well. They appointed a 9/11 conspiracy theorist as a new school board president. That sounds suspiciously like Trump. They wanted a taxpayer-funded stadium for the Chicago Bears. Luckily, taxpayers voted that down. And on and on and on it goes. Just, they've learned nothing. They're just doubling up on their leftist insanity and driving the city deeper and deeper and deeper into oblivion. The Chicago Teachers Union, unbelievably corrupt. It has a budget of $30 million, which is funded by teacher dues. Most of that, though, goes into political campaigning. Only 17% of every dollar goes to actual representing teachers, something of value to teachers. During COVID, when they refused to open the schools in Chicago, Chicago Teachers Union president claimed that opening the schools was rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. Well, of course, she sent her child to a private school, where that was open, right? Of course, they fought to kill school choice programs, and for thousands of low-income students, and on and on and on it goes. Chicago is the new San Francisco, I guess, with fewer homeless people. But it's in worse physical shape. The difference, I mean, Chicago has a lot of very wealthy people, but most of those people are leaving. San Francisco has maintained most of its wealthy people in spite of the fact that even San Francisco people are leaving. Now, let's see what happens. So this article is pretty positive in the sense that they think that this is all going to collapse. And that out of the collapse, out of the ashes, if you will, a new Chicago will rise. That Chicago is on the verge of, in a sense, a rebellion against the existing administration. That the people of Chicago are fed up. And that, that Chicago will make a comeback. Now, I will keep an eye out in Chicago. I now know who to follow. There's this guy, Austin Berg, B-E-R-G, who has a Twitter channel that kind of keeps up with Chicago. And Chicago's an important place, a beautiful city. I wouldn't go in winter, though. That has resisted failure for a couple of decades now. It should have failed a long time ago. Suddenly, somehow stayed afloat. Maybe it's finally going to collapse, and maybe something will happen that's positive out of that collapse. So we can hope. That would be cool. All right. Let's see. What do we want to do here? We've got Super Chat questions. All right, just to remind everybody, this show is funded by listeners, watchers like you, and couldn't exist without you. And we have a goal, $250 an hour. We reached the goal for the first hour, but we have not reached it for the second hour, and we're already into the second hour. And given the questions, we might head towards a third hour. So please consider, like William and like a few others, doing a sticker to support Mary Aline and others to support the show and to keep it going. You can also support the show on Patreon by doing a monthly contribution. Robert, thank you for the sticker as well. Please consider doing that and getting us to our target, which is for the second hour is going to be, $500. So we're still way short of that. And then if we go 3 hours, $750. I'll also remind you that Alex Epstein is a sponsor of the Yaron Brook Show. Alex is by far the best commentator on all things energy, environmentalism, fossil fuels, and the electric grid and all that stuff. And you should follow him. And you should follow him not only because he's fighting the good fight, but also because he's having a huge impact on the Trump administration. I think Alex will be in on, very close to the decision makers when it comes to energy and maybe other stuff as well. He's close to a lot of people who are close to people right there. And we want to support that. I wouldn't be surprised if even DOGES, something, whatever it's called, whatever you want to call it, will be impacted by Alex. So support him. You can do that by going to alexepstein.substack.com. But of course, from a immediate selfish perspective, Alex provides you with these amazing talking points with real content that you can then use when you debate, argue with people about the environment, about climate change, about fossil fuels, about all these things. And he provides you in succinct, easy to grasp, easy to communicate ways that are just fantastic. So again, I encourage you to sign up for alexepstein.substack.com. And then we've got the Ayn Rand Institute, which is also a sponsor of the show. And the Ayn Rand Institute is, there is a webinar with Don Watkins and Nikos, where they're going to talk about being a rational consumer in a sense, or having fun and consuming, getting rid of the guilt associated with consumption. I don't know how many of you might have that, but I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a fun webinar. It's a great topic. Don, of course, and Nikos are great, right? They're both really smart and fun intellectuals. The webinar is on December 2nd. It's called Guiltless Pleasure, How to Consume Like an Egoist. So go to aynrand.org/start here, aynrand.org/start here to learn more and to register for the webinar. All right. Let's see, where are we? All right, let's start with not your average algorithm. Give me a second. Can you explain the difference between self-esteem and pseudo-self-esteem? For instance, Scott on the chat receives enormous verbal abuse. Yet that didn't deter him from coming back every show. Why isn't that type of resilience self-esteem? I go somewhere, and every time I go there, they torture me. Whoever, I don't know, there's a store in town, and they lock me up in a room, and they whip me. And I go back. Every day I go back. And that is supposed to be self-esteem. It's the exact opposite. I'm a masochist. I want pain, which is the opposite of wanting life, wanting values. For somebody to come on the chat, to spew, cynicism, hatred, and then be abused about it, and keep coming back to get the same abuse and to spew the same stuff, shows an irrationality, a certain masochism. And yeah, there's no self-esteem there. Self-esteem is the sense of, the real value of life. Yeah, on the chat also there's repetition. Repeat yourself over and over and over again. That all of that is anti-values. It's just divorce from values. Yeah. So self-esteem is about, I'm pursuing my life. I can and I will pursue pleasure, pursue success, and ultimately pursue happiness. I will do everything that's necessary in order to pursue that success, that happiness. I will not bend in that pursuit. I won't accept pain. I won't accept torture as the way of the world, as the given, as the standard. So, you have to have a healthy motivation. Self-esteem reflects itself in a healthy motivation and healthy behavior. I think what you're describing is unhealthy. So pseudo self-esteem is the appearance of self-esteem. It's a certain being, what do you call it? Somebody says, people pay good money for competent dominatrix. Yeah, people with low self-esteem. I mean, that's my point. I'm not saying that dominatrixes, that people don't want to be tortured. They do. But that's not an expression of self-esteem. That's the anti-self-esteem. That's an expression of lacking self-esteem and lacking life-driven values. Life-driven values. And pseudo self-esteem is the pretense of that. Again, it's somebody who's super defensive. Somebody who can take criticism because it, in a sense, it shatters his world. I mean, Donald Trump is a good example of pseudo self-esteem. Everybody thinks he has self-esteem because he comes across as confident and bombastic and so on. But he, say something to critique him, and he just melts. He falls apart. He lashes out in completely irrational fashion, which is exactly the opposite of what you would do if you had real self-esteem. So pseudo self-esteem is somebody who gives the appearance of confidence and driven by values, drive of values, but really once you challenge it, once you poke it a little bit, it all falls apart. It's pretend. It's not real. Okay, Clark. Thank you for the $50, Clark. I try to be benevolent and optimistic, but I find it forced, almost second-handed. By thinking, because objectivism is about benevolence, I need to orient myself that way, evading the fact that the world sucks in order to live up to the philosophy. Yeah, I mean, that's the wrong way to think about it. You should never think, because objectivism is X, therefore I need to change myself to be Y. Objectivism is not a list of commandments. It's not a guide of the specifics of how to live your life. You shouldn't be objectivist first. You should be a truth seeker first. And benevolence does not mean looking at the world and saying something that it's not. Benevolence involves, being an objectivist involves recognizing that the world sucks in significant ways. What benevolence implies, though, is that over the long run, because the philosophy is consistent with reality, the good will win out. Morality will win out. But that might not be an effect on you at this very moment. It might be that right now, given the state of the world, because you can't control other people, that life sucks right now. And that's just the reality. And your focus should always be on what is reality. So benevolence, it does not imply only good things will happen. It's not a, superficial Pollyannish view of the world. It basically is the view that if you commit to reality, then generally over the long run, good things happen, but that does not necessitate good things happening at any given point in time. So you shouldn't ignore reality because it's not right now matching up to what you see your philosophy as being. You should, maybe look deeper into reality, assess whether the world sucking out there really has as much impact on your life as you might be feeling right now. But you shouldn't ignore the fact that the world sucks, because it does. And, know what you can control, what you can't, and try to make your life, the parts of your life that you have control over, the best that they can be. And if you do that well, you can live a decent life, but you can't live as good of a life as you could if the world didn't suck. That's true. There's just no way around that. All right. Shazbot, what happens if Trump tries to deport a few million people, but the destination country or countries refuse to accept them? I don't know. It's one of the things they're going to have to work out. I think Trump will put tariffs on them until they agree. I don't know. Trump will threaten them until they agree. If it's Mexico, Trump might bomb them. Who knows? Tariffs. It's one of the things he'll use tariffs for, is to force countries to do what he wants them to do. And part of what he wants them to do is to take on illegal immigrants that we're deporting. But that's part of we'll see how this plays out. Andrew says, masculinity is an individual aspect of one's identity that is earned through productivity. It's not a social construct made through competition with others. Do you agree and think of a lot of people are confused by that? Yeah, it's certainly not a social construct, but it's part of your identity. I agree completely that it's earned. I agree completely that it's what you make of it, but it's partly your productivity and part of just your stance vis-a-vis reality, your stance vis-a-vis the world. But again, as we've talked about, there's a lot here to be researched. There's a lot here to really be thought about in terms of what. But I agree with what you're saying right there. It's not the social construct in and of itself, but it does change as society changes, because what you can, for example, it's easier to do with a woman, but even with a man, right? What constitutes productivity 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago is very different than what constitutes productivity today. So it will change because of the changed environment. The achievement is different. And certainly with a woman who certain things were out of their bounds 300 years ago are now completely within their bounds. All right. Let's see. Yes, Michael. Have you seen Robert Breedlove and Peter Schiff's debate over Bitcoin? No. I know the positions, but I haven't. I don't watch. I mean, I keep getting questions like this. I don't watch all the. I see you ask also, Michael. Did you get a chance to watch Milei on Lex Friedman? I think he's already having influence on the American right. No, I haven't seen it. I will. That one I'll try to watch because Milei interests me. But I don't know where you guys. I mean, I don't have the time. I just don't have the time. Between preparing for this show and doing the show and doing all the other things I'm supposed to do and spending some time with my wife, I just don't have time to listen to Lex Friedman 3-hour shows. Hopper, why is it easier politically to bash immigrants than to bash the welfare state? Doesn't altruism demand both groups be coddled? Because immigrants are the other. Immigrants are outsiders. The welfare state are the people you're supposed to coddle because they're your people. So altruism always, particularly in the guise of nationalism, always provides an out where you can sacrifice other people suffering over there, the other, or within your country, if they're Jews or something like that, if they're the other within your country. So altruism is now shaped by nationalism, but ultimately, and part of the way in which it's framed is immigrants are hurting our poor people, right? Because they're taking their jobs, they're lowering their wages, right? But that's all altruism. Who cares if they're taking their jobs and lowering their wages? Why should you care? Even if that were true, it's not. But even if it was, why would you care? If people moved from California to Utah and lowered people's wages because they took their jobs, would anybody care? No. But it's the outsider effect. So you combine altruism with nationalism, which excludes those others we don't sacrifice to, we actually sacrifice them to us. And we only sacrifice to the others that we have put under this umbrella of our particular national identity. Jonathan, USA may sanction ICC down with The Hague. We'll see. I hope so. But we'll see. James Taylor, the enlightened conservative position, quote, of course socialism is bad, but eliminating it is unrealistic. And since we have it, we must protect ourselves from immigrants who will unwind it faster. Yes. Yes, immigrants might bankrupt it really fast. We don't want that, because we already have it, and we're not really against the altruism of the welfare state. So we'll keep it, we'll just kick out the immigrants so we can save the welfare state. Of course, none of that is true. Immigrants actually contribute more than they consume, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Liam, by the time your career is over, do you think you will have as much impact on the world as Lenin? In a good way, of course. No. Lenin had a much, much bigger impact on the world. And he had an impact on over 100 million people in Russia. So, yeah, I don't expect to have that kind of influence. Barbara, I wish. With respect to the ability of the U.S. government, this is our first super chat, so thank you, Barbara. With respect to the ability of the U.S. government to pay its debt, what are the potential effects of U.S.-denominated bonds by countries other than the U.S., such as China? The fact that China holds the bonds? Nothing. There's no real effect. I mean, they can stop buying them, which would require other people to step in to buy them. And if those people didn't show up, then interest rates might have to rise in order to attract them to those bonds. But the fact that they own those bonds in and of themselves doesn't have doesn't make any difference. The United States could theoretically default on all the debt owned by the Chinese, but that means no foreign citizens would ever buy American debt again, and that would be very difficult for the United States because much of its debt is owned by foreigners, so it would be very hard for them to do that. No effect by the fact that China owns a lot of the debt. It's, people make a big deal out of that, and it's just not that important. Nick I had a chance to speak to former ambassador to Israel, Dan Krutzer, at school, and I was surprised. He was very supportive of a ceasefire. Thoughts? I don't know. I don't know what his reasoning is, but I am very, 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 very against the ceasefire. Israel needs to win. The only way to get peace, the only way to secure Israeli lives is to win. It's to crush the enemy. And Israel is still far from doing that. All right, guys, I'll just remind you again, Super Chat is important. It's the way this show is funded. It's value for value. You are listening. You're getting something out of it. Consider supporting the show. A sticker, even a small denomination sticker, shows your willingness to trade. Please consider jumping in with a sticker. $2, $5, $100, $500 would be great. Just value for value. Trade is a good thing, and we're short quite a bit of money for the second hour. Wyatt, is Gorsuch if Gorsuch is great in regulations and Elon and Vivek have a radical plan against regulators, isn't it good Hillary and Kamala didn't win? If that's the only thing you would consider, then it's good they didn't win. But I don't consider just that. I consider, and I don't know why I have to repeat myself, but I guess some things are just hard for people to absorb. I consider the long-term impact on freedom in America. I consider, and that could involve authoritarianism with less regulations. I consider the long-term impact on the Republican Party and the impact the non-existence of the Republican Party has on our politics. I consider all the other departments of the government, Justice Department, which we just got saved by Gaetz's horrible behavior, but that was just a fluke. I'm considering the HHS. I'm considering everything, tariffs, deportation. So you might want to focus on a few good things. I don't. I focus on a lot of big things, on a lot of varied things. And in the balance, I am anti-Trump. Always have been, always will be. And that doesn't mean he won't do good things. He'll do good things. Biden did good things. Biden supported Ukraine. Not as much as I'd like. Just like Vivek and Elon won't dismantle regulations as much as I'd like. Plus, Elon and Vivek's radical plan is still just a radical plan. Hasn't been implemented. Trump hasn't signed off. None of it is actually happening. So let's see what actually happens. Until we see what actually happens, it's hard to evaluate. Now, 4 years from now, if the Trump administration has managed to shrink government and balance the budget and move us towards greater liberty, and it's doing that all while protecting free speech and everything else, I will say, wow, I missed something. Trump is just being amazing. How did I miss it? That is very possible. Very unlikely, but possible. Not very possible. It's very unlikely, but possible. Silvanos came in with $100. Thank you, Silvanos. $100 sticker. Thank you. We also got stickers from WC. WCZN. Why is my Super Chat tracker today giving me so many problems? I don't know. Anyway, thank you, WCCN. Silvanos, of course, Apollo, Zeus, Jason, you guys, William, Mary Aline, all did great with that. And again, I am having the Super Chat questions have just disappeared. All right, let me do these while maybe they'll load. Let me close this window. I'm going to try something. One second. This is a new tech problems that shouldn't exist. Super Chat Tracker has been so stable and done so well. Suddenly, not working. Okay, it's doing that again. 1 second. It wants a Google API key. I can give it a Google API key. Copy. And then let's paste it in there. And okay. It's going to go through all of this again. Yes, I actually want to do this. Yes, I want to continue. Yes, I want that. And there it all came back. Somehow. I don't know that everything came back, but some stuff came back. God knows if I've lost stuff or not. No idea. All right. No, none of that looks right. Anyway, whatever. I think I might have lost some questions. Let me see. We've got Liam and Ed over there. I've got this. Sorry, I don't know why my Super Chat Tracker. Okay, let me just do some of these quickly before I lose them. Andrew says, Trump et al. Keep saying he will govern by common sense. How do you evaluate that claim? Is he accurate, just wrong on lacking principles, or do you not even buy that he is based on common sense? Yeah, I don't think there's any common sense in Trump. I think he governs based on emotion and based on who spoke to him last, who entered the room last. And if you read the books about Trump first administration, a lot was who spoke to him last, who was he influenced by last. He can't retain anything. He's not smart. Let's just be very clear. He's not intelligent, not as an integrating ability to hold abstract ideas and hold principles and hold ideas and hold strategy. So whoever gets to him, he'll listen to, and then he'll go away. So a lot of it is the quality of the people he surrounds himself with, and this does not look like a group filled with common sense. Enric says the Department of Justice is going ahead and requesting judge to force Google to sell Chrome. Yes, I saw that. I will talk about that maybe tomorrow on a future show. I'll talk about that. I have to look at what else they're asking for. That's not the only thing they're asking for. They're asking for a bunch of other stuff. James, but yes, it's unbelievably evil. But it'll be appealed. It's going to be years before anything happens. James, why did so many Jews live in South Africa, and what was it like growing up there? I never grew up there. My parents grew up there. I grew up in Israel. Jews lived in South Africa because they were fleeing, and they were going anywhere they could, and anywhere boats would take them, and anywhere where there was open, and there was a period where South Africa was open to immigrants. It was in the midst of being colonized by the British, and the British were open to letting anybody come in, and Jews, particularly from Lithuania, almost all South African Jews are from Lithuania, just wanted out. They were being killed. They were being massacred. Pogroms, you've heard of the word pogrom. They were just slaughtered. My ancestors, family's ancestors, they were just being slaughtered. So they wanted out. So they got on boats and they sailed. And many of the boats went to South Africa because that was a place that was being at the time colonized, and they were open to immigrants, and they settled there. And then over the years, many of them left because South Africa became hostile to Jews or hostile to just production. And they moved to Australia and to America and to other places. Israel, a lot of South African Jews in Israel. All right, thank you, James. Let's see, Kim, yesterday you said MBA was lame. What are some good reasons to get one? The main reason to get one is if you think it'll advance your career. That is, if having it will give you a leg up, if having it on your resume is something of value. But no, you don't learn anything of real substance in an MBA. There's nothing you can't learn on the job or by taking some courses online. It's mainly a diploma. And if you think the diploma has value, then you should do it. And if you don't think the diploma has value, given your particular circumstances, then don't get it. It's a waste of money. Waste of money. All right, Liam says, was Sabah and Shatila a justified action by Israel? Were you in the military when it happened? It's a trick question, because Sabah and Shatila was not an action by Israel. See, this is the kind of mythology that spreads. So Sabah and Shatila were refugee camps of Palestinians in South Lebanon. They still exist. In South Beirut. And in 1982, late 1982, early 1983, and I can't remember if I think I was in the military when this happened. And very involved in what was going on in Beirut when this happened. The Christians came to the Israelis and said, we're going to go into Sabah and Shatila and root out the terrorists, the armed terrorists. And the Israeli said, okay. And basically, the Christian forces, these are Christian militias that were fighting in a civil war at the time against the Palestinians and against others, Muslims, Druze, Syrians, other Christian factions. I mean, it was just a mess in Beirut in those days. They went into Sabah Shatila, and instead of killing militants, instead of killing armed terrorists, they slaughtered men, women, and children. Wholesale. Without any kind of discrimination. And was that justified? No. It was absolutely not justified. But Israel didn't do it. The Christians did. And, I mean, Israeli troops on the border of Sabah and Shatila might have had an inkling that that was going on, but what were they going to do? Enter in there and separate out the forces? Once Israel found out, they told the Christians to stop immediately and get out of there, and they did. And they condemned it, but it was too late. And ultimately, Arik Sharon was forced to resign over this. That he was the defense secretary, head of the Defense Department in Israel during that period, which was a tragedy. He shouldn't have had to be forced to resign. It wasn't his fault. But there you go. I mean, it had nothing to do with Israel. But this is how these stories, and Israel was not responsible. It was part of the civil war. It was part of the battle between the Christians and the Palestinians. And the Christians did this horrible, just horrible thing. Ed Kelsky, Yaron, do you know what is required to eliminate a full department? Well, I mean, if the department was created by Congress, I assume it would require an act of Congress. It would require the zeroing out of a budget, because otherwise the executive branch has to pay out that budget. I mean, for example, Trump could ask Congress for a zero budget for the Department of Education, and Congress to decide that the budget should be $100 billion and approve that budget, and Trump would have to, if he signs onto that budget, would have to spend that money on education. So, again, to eliminate the department would require an act of Congress, and it would require a real elimination of all those line items that include the department, which is not easy. Now, I would like to see a lot of departments eliminated. There were a lot of departments in the American government that are unnecessary, abusive even, and it would be great to get rid of them. Sylvanus, again, thank you. He says, hey, Yaron, keep on doing what you do. I appreciate it. Shazbot, from now on, everyone must change their underpants every half hour, and they must wear their underpants on the outside so we can check. This is El Presidente in Woody Allen's Bananas. A movie I really like. It's completely insane. Completely insane, but really, really funny. Really, really funny movie. So I encourage you to watch it. It's part of those brilliant early Woody Allen movies. Christian, Josh Hawley criticized Visa and MasterCard for controlling 80% of the market, charging excessive swipe fees to small businesses and favoring large retailers and discounts. How would you counter this argument? I mean, I wouldn't. Even if that were true, and it is, why is it any of Josh Hawley's business? They do control 80% of the market. I mean, the other 20%, I guess, is American Express. I don't know what the numbers are, but let's assume it's true. So frigging what? Of course, large retailers are going to get discounts. If you're hauling lumber, are you going to charge a small lumber company that once in a while calls you up and hauls a little bit of lumber versus a large company that is constantly giving you lumber to haul on a regular basis, on a regular schedule? You're going to give them a discount, a quantity discount, you call it, right? There is no answer. The answer is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin costs a lot more to transact than Visa and MasterCard. A lot more. Costs a lot more to buy and sell stuff with Bitcoin than it does with Visa and MasterCard. So there is no problem here. Why is it any of Josh Hawley's business, is the question. Why does Josh Hawley care? What has given Josh Hawley the authority or the expertise to evaluate what's good for the market? I have like 18 credit cards. I don't have any problem. You know, what is... Again, this is not the role of government. That's my argument. It's not that there's... You know, and credit cards, let's be clear, credit card companies provide a massive value to the American people. And the fact that there are only 2 or 3 major credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, there's also Discover, is probably because it's a scale business, and you need scale. And if these companies abuse the market power that they have, the economic power that they have, then people will stop using them. So, but it's a, you know, we all use our credit cards, and because we use them, small businesses and big businesses all use them because it's so frigging convenient. And it's unbelievably cheap, given the convenience. It used to be that American Express charged more. In Europe, to this day, a lot of restaurants, a lot of places don't take American Express in Europe because American Express just charges more. Okay, so there's competition. But the role of the government is not to preserve competition. The role of the government is not to protect us from MasterCard and Visa. You could always pay with cash. Cash is competition to MasterCard and Visa. So are checks. So are debit cards. That's all competition. So I have nothing to say to Josh Hawley other than go away. Ron, I support these chats. Thank you, Ron. Really appreciate it. All right, this is our last question for the day. My super chat tracker broke down, so I don't know how much we raised today. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll get there next time. Barbara, last question. Thank you for your answer. I meant USD dollar-denominated bonds issued by other countries, not bonds issued by the United States and owned by other countries. Okay, so but what was the question? I mean, I think that the fact that other countries issue US-denominated bonds make it difficult for those other countries to pay back those bonds. They don't have any impact in the United States other than they increase the demand for US dollars, which increases the value of US dollars vis-a-vis other currencies. So, for example, if Turkey issues bonds, dollar-denominated bonds, then they have to pay it back in dollars, which means at some point they have to go into the market and buy dollars, which puts upward pressure to the value of the dollar vis-a-vis the Turkish lira. And it makes it possible for Turkey not to be able to pay off its debts because nobody, for example, might be willing to sell them dollars. That's, for example, what's happened in a couple of times to Argentina that issued dollar-denominated bonds, and they couldn't pay them because it didn't have enough dollars, and nobody would sell them enough dollars. Right? So Miroslav says, we've raised $450 today, which is $50 short, given that we're almost finished with the second hour. So if somebody wants to step in with $50, that would make my day, or 225s or something like that. I want to say something else about this. Now, if Argentina issues debt in their local currency, they can always pay it back because they can always print money. They can print the local currency. They can't print dollars. But see, one of the reasons they issue bonds in US dollars is because nobody will buy government-denominated debt in Argentinian currency, given the Argentinian government's history of printing money and inflating it away and lowering the value of those bonds. Where everybody knows they cannot do that, they cannot do it with regard to the dollar. That's why they do it, and that's why people buy their bonds. Hopefully, I've now answered your question, Barbara. Sorry about that. Andrew, how do you square the Christian nationalists are willing to sacrifice moral character for political ends? Yeah, because we're all fallen. We're all fallen being. We're all sinful. This world is not a place to seek out purity of character. That's for the afterlife. Who are we to judge? God judges us all. Moral character is not that important. Is not that big of a deal. But what can be achieved from with political power is the imposition of a new morality on millions, hundreds of millions of people. And that is of such great value to them that a fallen individual's lack of character is relatively insignificant in comparison. I mean, it's the same reason why they could think of slaughtering, pagans who refuse to convert to Christianity. In the name of religion, in the name of the ultimate goal, anything is acceptable. Any sacrifice is acceptable, including the sacrifice of character. All right, we're getting some. Thank you, Apollo Zeus. Appreciate the support. Richard, I think left-wingers take over vibrant cities like Chicago and San Francisco because that's where the money is. As a bank robber once said, what do you think? I don't know if that's true. They get voted in, so why do people vote them in? I think the reality is that for a variety of reasons, the left has had, because of the acceptance of Marxist ideology, historically the poor, working class poor, have been left, and they vote in the left, and then but who is going to represent that left? The people who represent that left are always the intellectual left, and the intellectual left is always way far lefter than the working class left, and that dynamics, I think, works itself out. I don't think this that sophisticated where they go, okay, let's find some rich cities and go over there. Why they get elected? So it's just a reality that what you have in these cities is two populations that vote left. You have the very poor, many of the minorities that tend to vote left for all the Marxist or social reasons that they would, the association of right with racism being one of them, which has often been false in history, but the association is there. And then an urban, educated elite that is very left. And that combination gives them political power. It's It's not a conspiracy. It's not a attempt to grab. They do grab, but they're not sophisticated enough to figure that out. Matt, there is already the Government Accountability Office, GAO, so Elon and Vivek's DOGE is implicitly inefficient and should shut itself down on day one. Yeah, you'd think. It's not part of the government. They're not, I don't know how many people they'll employ, who's going to employ them, how does that work? Elon and Vivek are not taking a salary, and they're not going to be government employees. I mean, the whole thing is, we're going to see, right, how it works out. I mean, here today I just articulated kind of what they articulated as their strategy, which is somewhat interesting, you could say. Somewhat interesting. All right, it looks like we're $20 short from the 500. Somebody wants to do a $20 sticker as we say goodbye. Thank you all. Thank you to all the super chatters. Really, really appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow, I think at the same time. Hopefully I'll be feeling a little bit better. And yeah, I've got a bunch of ideas of what we'll talk about, but I'm not sure about tomorrow, Saturday. Probably no show on Saturday because my flight is earlier now. But there will be a show tomorrow for sure. For sure, I say. And then I get sick. See you tomorrow, guys. Bye, everybody.